Paul here from Dusty Workbench. Welcome back. Finally getting around to making a video about the adjustments for the Ridgid R4520. We did a video a little while back about the differences about the R4520 versus the R4512. You can click on the link above here or above here. I'm not sure which side. I always forget which side. If you want to look at that video to see the main differences between the two saws. But today we're just going to get right into how to fine tune or align, I should say, the blade and the fence for this table. The instructions are in the book, but you know there's a lot of pages to go through just to get the instructions. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, so I thought I'd do a video which might help you to understand, well, I guess how easy it is to do the alignment for this table saw. Again, it's the Ridgid R4520 hybrid table, so we're going to get right into it. And of course, if you haven't done it already, please hit the subscribe button. And when you do that, there's a notification bell. You want to click that to know each time we get a new video coming out, as well as, hey, hit the like button. All right, first thing we have to do is to square up or align the blade to the tabletop. Depending what type of table saw you have, this one is a hybrid table. So that means the blade, the motor, and all that are hanging on trunnions, and that is attached to the tabletop. If you were to have a cabinet table, it's kind of opposite. The blade and the motor and everything is actually attached to the cabinet, and then to align your blade to the tabletop, you actually have to move the tabletop. In our case, we actually have to move the blade, the motor, and all the attachments underneath, and you'll see that once I open the back end of it. So there's a little bit of fidgeting around for that, but it is quite easy. So first thing you have to do is get some tools. One, I'm just going to use a combination square to see if the blade is actually square to the groove here on the table. I don't know if you can see that. So you want to make sure your blade is actually square to the grooves on the table. So we're going to use a combination square for that. Another thing you'll need is a screwdriver. This happens to be an extra long one, and that's just to be able to move the trunnions and the motor and the blade basically from left to right at the back end. Once I open that up, you'll see that again. And of course you need some Allen wrenches that came with the saw itself, so that you can take off the bolts and loosen the two bolts to be able to move the trunnion. So first thing we have to do is take off the guard here, the blade guard. Get all this stuff out of the way. Before actually, safety first, always unplug it. Make sure your saw is unplugged, no power going in. You take off the blade guard, the anti-kickback, and you take off the riving knife as well. So to do take off the riving knife, you open up and take out the plate. There's a little lever here on the side. It's tight. There we go. All right. Actually, I had it tight. Take the riving knife out. So, it's pretty easy because there is a little lever here. I don't know if you can bring it right in. So this little lever here, push it down, is to tighten it, and then bring it up and we'll loosen it. So really easy to move. And then we'll be adjusting that as well if need be. There's little adjustment screws right there for the riving knife as well. Okay, so we're just going to put the plate back in place here. Lock that in place. Get the combination square and a marker. I forgot that. We also need a marker or Sharpie. And what we're going to do is we're going to mark one of the teeth on the blade. I don't know if you can come in really close there. We'll mark a blade tooth so we know which one we're measuring, just in case that when we're measuring from the front to the back that we're measuring from the same tooth. That way if the blade has some play in it, it's not because of the blade that we're off square, and it's actually because of the blade, I should say. If there's a wobble in the blade kind of thing in the manufacturing, if it's off, then we're not going to sort of compensate the whole mechanism just because of the blade having an issue. So I'm going to use the same tooth to guide us to see if it is square. So the best thing as well is also to bring the blade all the way up so that you have maximum measurement from the front to the back. Just bring the blade up. There we go. I'm just going to put the table down to the floor because I have it on the track. There we go. So to measure, I'm using the combination square again. So within the groove here on the right, you're just going to bring the blade right up to the tooth. And you can almost just feel it touching there. It's just sort of rubbing. I already measured it. And from the inside of the groove to the blade is at 4 5/8. It's just sort of touching there. So I can bring it. Now it's touching a bit more. I'm going to loosen it a bit. It might be. There we go. I can feel that just touching the blade. So now we bring the combination square to the back and we keep the same tooth. Measure from the same tooth at the back. I can see that it is off. Probably it's really catching the ruler there from my combination square. So that means the blade in perspective to this groove is at the back is towards the fence because the fence is on this side. And that means the blade is going towards the fence, which is not the best scenario. If the blade's going to be off, it's going to be misaligned. It's always better to be misaligned away from the fence so that when you're cutting wood, it's not getting jammed at the end and higher risk of kickback. So definitely need to adjust it. I noticed that when I was doing some cuts that it was off. So I'm going to be doing a little micro adjustment. Really doesn't have to be very much. Maybe a 1/16 of an inch. I'll have to move it that way. Oops. All right, to make the adjustments to the blade, to go left and right, you're going to have to open this back panel. There's 6 screws to take out using the Allen wrench. I think it's a 4mm. And so we're just going to take these out. I think I have the right one. There we go. All right, so for some reason this one I think is just worn out, so I'm going to use my handy dandy multi-Allen wrench tool here to take out these screws at the back. And it's actually easier to handle having a larger handle on this Allen wrench. So I mean, it's nice to have those Allen wrenches when when you buy your new saw to put it together, but in case you don't have one of these, but sometimes they're not the best metal and they don't last very long, so it's always good to have a backup.
Yeah.
All right, so take the back off. I have the light on so you can see I've been using it, a bit of dust in there. And I don't know if you can get in with the camera. So this is your whole saw blade mechanism, a motor, and that's where it's going to be able to, tilt and go up and down. So, and this is attached to the tabletop, and here at the back, I don't know if you can really see that. So right here, we have 2 screws that we have to loosen. And so those are 2 screws you loosen, and then you use a screwdriver through this hole to sort of pry the whole mechanism to the left or to the right. So us, we want it to go, in our case, from here to the right by about 1/6 of an inch. So, well, 1/16 of an inch. So first thing, you have to loosen that. I think this is the right one. Yeah. So we'll loosen it a bit. It's tight. Try this one first. Don't loosen it too much. Something a little bit longer on there. It's really tight, so I'm just adding a little bit more leverage. There we go. All right, so it should be loose enough. I'm going to put the combination square with the tooth, just so I can keep an eye on how much I'm actually moving it. So I'll show you here down below. You just put your screwdriver through this hole here, is what it's made for, and then you just pry it up against the back end of the saw blade mechanism. So while looking at that, I'm just going to give it a little, see if I can move it. It's not moving, so I'm going to have to loosen it a little bit more. Just to make sure we have enough play. There we go. So bring it back to the right tooth. And there. There we go. So I'm going to bounce back a bit. So now I went a little bit too far. You can see it's not even touching there anymore. Bring it back. A little bit too much. There we go. Just touching the same way. Right there. And then that way at the back end, I can do the same thing with that same marked tooth here to see if it's lined up, and that way, because what happens is if you try to do right to the edge with the belt and the motor tension, it tends to want to go back, and when you're trying to do this alone, it's a bit of a pain. So it's easier to put it right into the tooth itself, and then that way you can see if it's aligned, and it's that'd be like right where I'd want it to be. And making sure it's nice and tight. So before I measure the front again, I'm going to tighten the bolts so I don't lose. There's that. Using the Allen wrench, so tighten that, snug that up a bit. We'll snug this one so it doesn't move while I check the front again. So I'm using the right tooth. I'm just going to check the back one more time. So the inside 1 inch on that tooth, and following that mark, combination square over, and we hope that it comes out to right on the mark. All right, so that'll do it. That'll square up the blade with the table saw. Blade with the table saw top. So I'll just check for good measure. I'll go on this side. I'll extend that again. I'll find the same tooth here. Put it at the inside at the 1 inch mark just to be consistent. Again, it doesn't really matter what measurement you have. It's just so that as long as the front measurement is equal, front measurement of the blade is equal to the back, according to the grooves here. So inside 1 inch, right there. Same technique. It should be the same. And you can see that. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it's pretty dead on there. So we're good to go. So I'll give it one more tug on the bolt to make sure it's good and tight. One. There we go. That should do her. Now, one thing that would have been nice is if you were to have little screws and bolts on each side of that, so that when you loosen this, you can just fine tune it instead of using a pry bar and you're going over exaggerating one way or the other. It would have been nice that you can just adjust the bolts left to right, loosen one side, and then slightly turn until it gets to where you want it, and then tighten it back the other one, and it would stay in place. But suggestion for Ridgid, if ever you upgrade your saw the next time, that'd be nice to have. So cool. Well, that's one thing done. Blade is aligned with the tabletop. Okay, next we're gonna do an alignment of the fence to the blade. So because now we have the blade, the miter gauge all lined up, we're gonna, miter gauge groove I should say, all lined up, we're gonna line the blade to the fence. So to do that, you're gonna bring your fence closer to, make sure the low fence is away from the blade when doing this. We need to have that in place. Bring the fence over about 3 inches away, they suggest. Doesn't have to be exact. So 3 inches away, we're going to use our ruler. We'll use our combination square ruler here. Using the same, or the marked tooth. We're going to just, again, align tooth. So I'm going to put it right on 3 inches here just to see if it's accurate that way as well. So the tooth on the inside is right on. I'm going to get my glasses. Getting old, so I want to make sure. I'm not going to bring the camera because my camera doesn't have a high enough resolution to show you. There, I can see it. So I can see that the tooth is right on 3 inches there. And it's also right on the mark here at 3 inches. So I know that at least my ruler is set properly, at least for the front end of the fence. So now I'm going to bring the ruler back to the back end of the fence. I'm using the ruler, the same tooth, to see if that is square. So now it is showing, I'd say, it's because I don't have the highest scale here, I'm showing the 1/8, so it's like basically a 1/32 to 1/64 of an inch. Still tight this way, so that it's right on the mark here, in the back. Definitely fence is towards the blade here now. And again, it was worse before because the blade was actually that way too, and that means the fence was also going that way. But now I'm going to do the adjustment. So let's do that next. And then to do that, there's 4 screws here. Right on the fence itself. So you got 4 screws that you use the Allen wrench that we're going to be doing the adjustments. So I don't need to adjust my tooth here. This one is right on the mark, so I'll leave it at that. Eventually I might have to check this one here on the left side, but I know the right side is working perfectly. All right, so to adjust the fence, again, quite simple. Just loosen up the 4 screws here using an Allen wrench, either the one that came with the saw or the other, your own tool. This one, again, I don't know if it's just dust in it. It's just getting worn down a bit. Quite simply, I'm just going to loosen that. Not too much. Keep it at 3 inches. Mark the tooth, still at 3. Mark the tooth. So now you should be able to set it over. And lock it. So jiggle it a bit here just to make sure that it stays at 3. And lock it. And I'm going to tighten them up. There. Bring the blade back. And we're still at 3 there. Perfect. So I'm going to move it to 4. Again, just to give it another check. And we're good right there. So now it's nicely aligned. Make sure it's fitting tight. There. So now, now it should be, need to bring that down a little bit. Set it at 4. I'll go at 5 this time, just to be sure. Still nicely aligned. Tooth, mark tooth, nicely on 5. And mark tooth, inside, right on 5. I love it. Okay. And I could see right away. In the past, I was able to see that it was off. Now I can see that it's nice and straight. So I know I'm on the right track. Next thing you want to check is the squareness of the fence. If it's up 90 degrees to the table. Again, you can use a combination square. See, that's right. And it does look good like that. Now, if you did have to adjust the 90 degrees of the fence to the tabletop, there's 2 screws right here. Basically little nylon screws that will tilt the whole fence left or right. So very easy again, just with a screwdriver. You just have to adjust up and down and you'd have that nicely aligned. All right, so I think we're pretty much done. I mean, the next thing would be to align the miter gauge in the table to the blade as well. The miter gauge. So we're going to, of course, you want to make it, we have it set at 0 here. Of course, that's 90 degrees to the blade. So one way of testing that, of course, is using a square. A large enough square, you can use that. Putting it right up against the blade. Again, take into account if you have it up against a tooth there. So you want to make sure there's no light coming in here. So it's nice and solid against the blade there. And then the same thing here. Just want to make sure that it's nice and snug, and it is showing that it is it's right on the mark. I like it. Okay, so actually that's pretty good. Otherwise, if it wasn't, you can adjust the 0 mark the zero stop just by adjusting the screws underneath here, kind of thing. So there's different screws because you do have 0 and 45 degrees that you can set it at, and it's 30 degree here. So that if you are going to adjust it quickly, you loosen the knob, just tighten the knob, it's pretty tight. And you want it to go at 45, oops, sorry, 45 this way. So it has, so your zero mark, it does have a stop. If you bring the pin out, it'll free flow like that. But if you put the pin in, and then you'll hit it there, so it's at the zero mark, and then you can tighten it down to keep it there. So if you wanted to go, let's say, quickly do a 45, pull out the pin, move it a bit, put the pin in back, stop it, the screw stops at 45, and then you can tighten it up there. Now, so you're just going to pick it out to see if it's actually a 45 degree here, or in this case, it's going to be the opposite, or put it on the other side. Right there, so that should be a 45 degree angle there. So, your miter gauge here, combination square, nice against the blade, and again, looking pretty much right on track there still. So we'll leave it at that. So that's good. So we're all squared up. We've got a miter, so now we can do our test cuts to see if it's actually making a true square. And you can do the 5-side square cut technique. I won't bother. There's many other videos out there that will show you how to do that. I'll put some links down in the description. Okay, so I'm not going to get too in-depth in regards to whether or not the blade is at what angle, because a lot of people will have the digital magnetic blade angle indicators that they can put right on the blade. First you put it on the table, get it adjusted to 0, and then you put it on your blade, and then you can, automatically see the angle that you want. So a lot of people don't even bother looking at the angle on the table saw itself, but for those who don't have that nice little digital, which I don't have yet myself, you can do it this way. So one, of course, you use your combination square again, making sure that it is square. You have it at the 0 mark here. And you can see with my combination square flat on the table and putting it up against the blade. Now I did take into account the thickness of the tooth, that it is sticking out about a 1/16 of an inch, on the one side for this blade. So I adjusted the combination square to take that into account, so that the bottom of the ruler is actually fitted against the blade, and then the top is actually hitting the tooth of the blade. So you're going to see a little gap in between, but that's going to be consistent right up to the top, and then the bottom is nice and flush to the tabletop. So 0 is truly at 0. So next, I'm going to see if the 45 is also aligned properly. And then we'll do an alignment check with the blade and with the miter gauge once it's at 45. So first, we're just going to loosen tighten that one up. I'll loosen the bevel adjustment here. Give it a crank. Switch my combination square to the opposite end, and we'll bring it to 45 as per the gauge here. So I have it on 45 right now. See if you have 45 here. So from the plate itself, it's looking good. That's looking good that way. You can also check the distance of I got the same tooth that's marked here. So I'm just gonna, for this test, I'm just gonna get it to touch it. You hear that there? So, make sure it's good and square against the miter. Bring it out a bit more again until you hear it. Oop. Right there, tighten the screw. Try that again. You can just hear it rubbing. Then I use the same tooth over at this end. That's pretty good. I think we can live with that. So that's square now, aligned. When it's 90 degrees, aligned with the miter gauge. And now at 45 degrees, it's also aligned with the miter gauge. If you really had to adjust the stop of the 45, if it wasn't at 45, you do have these screws here to sort of stop it or adjust the 45 degree angle. So, and you got that one there for the 0. So that's how you do it again, just using wrenches in those 2 screws if you needed to adjust them. So this was my first experience in adjusting this type of table saw, so I thought I'd pass that over to you to sort of see that, you know, someone like myself who I only had contractor tables before this, and if you're someone that's going to be moving up to a hybrid table or maybe even higher up to a cabinet style table, which is a different way of, I understand it's a different method of alignment because you're actually aligning the tabletop to the cabinet. Versus this, you're aligning the trunnions, the attach all the mechanisms that is attached to the tabletop. So it's a little bit different because the other one you're just having to swivel the tabletop left to right, up and down kind of thing to get it all squared up. Whereas this one you're actually adjusting the blade and all the mechanisms underneath to align with the tabletop. So it's kind of like the opposite way. If you were to flip it around, you're moving the mechanism, whereas the other one, it's flipped up and you're moving the tabletop. If that makes sense. But so I'm not going to get into details of that, of course, but I'll leave links down below of people that give great tutorials and great explanations in regards to how to pretty much manage all types of table saws and how to adjust them. In this case, like I said, it's more of just showing you moving from a contractor table up to a hybrid table, that adjusting one of these, it's not too bad. It does come with the instruction manual. It's a bit of a pain because you're having to find out through the operation levels of where all the adjustments are before, and then it's of course referring you to other pages to do something else. So I thought this video might be a little bit helpful to help you get through the adjustment process altogether. So that's it in a nutshell for this video. We will be back with some other videos in regards to some builds that we do. We're do some other product reviews, and for our workshop, we're getting a few things set up here. As you can see, it's kind of blank. I'm not sure if you saw around when I was moving the camera, but we are in sort of a restructuring of the workshop. So stay tuned. We're going to do some more videos on that as well. Thanks again for joining us here at the Dusty Workbench.